3 days before my grandson's graduation ceremony, I drove to Hargrove and Associates to sign the paperwork that would release his college trust fund. My husband Leonard had set it up in 2007, the year our grandson was born. $250,000, locked until he turned 22 and graduated. Leonard died in 2014. I had managed the trust alone ever since, renewing it every 3 years, meeting with the same firm, signing the same forms. It was routine. Or so I thought. I was sitting in the waiting area when the receptionist leaned across her desk and spoke in a voice just loud enough for me to hear. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said, "I need to show you something before Mr. Hargrove calls you in. Come with me. Please don't say anything." Her name was Penny, 26 years old, maybe. She'd been at the front desk every time I visited for the past 4 years. I always brought her a Christmas card. I had no idea why she was looking at me like that, like she was afraid of something. But I followed her into the copy room and closed the door. She pulled up something on her phone and held it out to me. It was a wire transfer confirmation. My name at the top. $180,000. Sent 3 weeks ago to an account I didn't recognize. I hadn't sent anything. I looked up at Penny. Her hands were shaking. "I printed it by accident last Thursday," she whispered. "It came through our system. I didn't know what to do. I almost didn't say anything. But you always remembered my name." I stood there in that copy room holding her phone, and I could feel the blood draining out of my face. The graduation was Saturday, 3 days away. My daughter had been planning it for 6 months. My son-in-law had offered to handle all the financial logistics so I wouldn't have to worry. He'd said it so kindly. He'd said I deserved to rest. I handed Penny back her phone. I thanked her. I walked out of Hargrove and Associates, got into my car, and sat there without starting the engine for a very long time. I want to tell you something before I go any further. I'm 67 years old. I've been a widow for 10 years. I raised my daughter alone after Leonard got sick, working 30-hour weeks at the hospital billing department while also keeping his contracting business from going under. When he died, I kept that business running for 2 more years until I found a buyer who would honor his employees. I am not a woman who panics easily, but sitting in that parking lot, I felt something I hadn't felt since the morning the hospital called about Leonard. That specific cold that starts in your chest and spreads outward. My son-in-law's name was Curtis. He had been married to my daughter Anyt for 6 years. He was 41, an inch shorter than me, and had the kind of smile that arrives slightly before the rest of his face, like it had been rehearsed. When he and Annette got together, I tried to like him. Annette was 35 and she had been lonely for a long time after her first marriage ended badly. Curtis paid attention to her. He remembered details. He asked her opinion. That kind of attention feels like love when you've been starved for it, and I understood that, so I kept my quiet. He started working his way into our finances about 18 months after the wedding, slowly, offering to drive me to appointments, suggesting I let him review the trust paperwork because these firms can be sloppy, mentioning that the trust account interest rate was too low, that he knew a better vehicle, that Leonard would have wanted me to be smarter about it. He said that phrase, Leonard would have wanted, 3 separate times over 2 years. Each time I changed the subject, each time he let it go, and then moved an inch closer the next visit. I had never given him access to the trust, but apparently someone had. I did not go home. I drove to my friend Harriet's house, and then caught myself. Harriet was Annette's godmother. She loved Curtis. She thought he was charming. I couldn't go there. I drove past her street and kept going. I called my oldest friend instead. Her name is Vera. We met in 1982 at a hospital billing conference in Columbus, Ohio. She is 70 and sharp and has no patience for anyone who wastes her time. She answered on the second ring. Something is wrong, I said. Pull over, she said. Tell me. I told her about Penny, about the wire transfer, about the account number I didn't recognize. Vera didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "Where are you right now?" I told her. She said, "Drive to my house. Don't call Anyt." I drove to Vera's house in Wilmington, Delaware. She lived 40 minutes from me in a colonial on a quiet street she'd shared with her late husband for 30 years. She met me at the door with coffee already made. I sat at her kitchen table and put my hands around the mug and tried to remember how to breathe normally. "How much is left in the trust?" she asked. "There should be 250,000 plus interest. Probably close to 270 by now. And you're saying 180 went somewhere 3 weeks ago. I'm saying a wire transfer with my name on it sent $180,000 from an account at Hargrove and Associates 3 weeks ago. And I didn't sign anything." Vera set down her mug. "Then either your signature was forged or someone used your credentials." I stared at the table. Curtis handles the logins for the estate management portal. He set it up 2 years ago. Said it was easier. Vera looked at me for a moment without saying anything. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. The man she called was named Desmond Price. He was a financial fraud investigator, formerly with the Delaware Department of Justice. He had helped Vera's niece 4 years ago when her business partner had embezzled from their catering company. Vera had kept his card. Desmond answered on the third ring and said he could meet us at 7 that evening. It was 2 in the afternoon. I had 5 hours to wait and nothing to do with my hands. So I told Vera everything, not just about the wire transfer, but about the past 2 years. The small things, the way Curtis had started sitting at the head of Leonard's table at holiday dinners, the way he'd begun answering questions that Anyt directed at me smoothly before I could respond, the time he had suggested, gently, that I was getting overwhelmed by the paperwork side of things, the time Anyt had told me, out of nowhere, that she thought I should consider a smaller house because the upkeep was getting to be a lot for one person. I had dismissed each thing individually. Sitting in Vera's kitchen, I heard them lined up in a row. Vera poured more coffee. "He's been building a case," she said, "about you." I knew she was right. I just hadn't wanted to say it out loud. Desmond Price arrived at 7 with a laptop and a legal pad. He was 54, heavy-set, with glasses and a quiet manner that made me feel like he had heard much worse than this and survived it. He asked me to walk him through everything chronologically. I did. He took notes without looking up. When I finished, he asked 3 questions. Who else had access to the estate portal? Had I ever signed a document authorizing a representative to act on my behalf financially? And had I seen a doctor in the last 18 months for anything related to memory or cognition? The last question made me go still. "They took me to a neurologist," I said slowly. "Curtis and Anyt. Last November. Curtis said he'd noticed I was repeating stories and forgetting appointments. He said he was worried." Desmond nodded and wrote something down. "The doctor, his name was Dr. Alton Briggs. He did a memory screening. He said everything was normal. He said I was fine." "Do you have a copy of that report?" I didn't. I had never been given one. Curtis had driven me to the appointment. Curtis had spoken to Dr. Briggs privately for a few minutes while I was in the restroom afterward. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Desmond set down his pen. "Mrs. Whitfield, I need to tell you something. The pattern you're describing, the financial access, the doctor's appointment, the gradual suggestion that you're struggling. This is a specific playbook. I've seen it before. What I need to know is whether it's already in motion legally or whether we still have time." "The graduation is Saturday," I said. My daughter asked me to bring my will and the original trust documents. She said it would be easier to have everything together for the notary. Desmond looked at me over his glasses. Did she say which notary? I hadn't thought to ask. I had agreed because it seemed practical. Annette had said it with such ease. She'd said, "Mom, it'll be nice to get all of it organized, don't you think? Before things get too busy." I had thought she was being thoughtful. Desmond opened his laptop. "Give me 48 hours," he said. "Don't sign anything. Don't bring any documents to the graduation. If Annette asks, tell her you forgot." I looked at him. "What are you looking for?" "Three things," he said, "each one worse than the last." I didn't sleep. I drove home and lay on top of my bedspread in the dark and stared at the ceiling. The graduation was Saturday. My grandson was turning 22. I had watched that boy take his first steps on the hardwood floor of my kitchen. I had driven him to his baseball games every Saturday for 6 years after Leonard died because his mother worked weekends and his father, her first husband, had already moved to Phoenix. I had read to him until he was 12, long after most grandmothers stop. And now I was lying in the dark wondering whether the woman I had raised was helping her husband steal from me. I got up at 5 in the morning, made coffee, sat in Leonard's armchair by the window and watched the sun come up over the backyard. At 6:47, Desmond texted, "Found the LLC, incorporated 8 months ago in Wyoming. 2 members, need to show you in person." At 9 in the morning, I called Anyt. I told her the graduation looked beautiful on the schedule she'd sent. I told her I couldn't wait. I told her I couldn't wait. I told her I would bring the documents she'd asked for. She said, "Thank you, Mom. I love you." I said it back. I hung up and sat with the phone in my lap. By the time Desmond arrived at Vera's house the following afternoon, I had not eaten a real meal in 26 hours. He set 3 folders on the kitchen table. He'd color-coded them, orange, green, gray. "Start with orange," he said. The first document was a Wyoming LLC registration. The company name was Crestline Asset Holdings, registered 8 months ago. 2 members, Curtis Aldane and Annette Aldane. My daughter's married name in black ink on a formation document for a company I had never heard of. Desmond laid a bank statement beside it, a wire transfer dated March 14th. $180,000 from the Hargrove Estate Management account for the Leonard Whitfield Memorial Trust. Destination, Crestline Asset Holdings operating account. "This is your money," Desmond said. "It's already moved." I kept my hands flat on the table. The Hargrove portal was accessed using your login credentials on March 12th, from an IP address registered to Curtis Aldane's home office. I closed my eyes for exactly 3 seconds, then I opened them. "Show me the green folder." The green folder was Dr. Alton Briggs. Desmond opened it and spread 3 pages across the table. "Dr. Briggs has 2 active complaints with the Delaware Medical Board," he said, "both filed by families of elderly patients. In both cases, the complaint alleges he produced a cognitive assessment that was exaggerated or fabricated to support a guardianship filing." I looked at the pages, names I didn't know, dates going back to 2020. In one case, Desmond continued, a 74-year-old woman was declared partially incompetent based on Dr. Briggs's assessment. Her son obtained financial power of attorney within 30 days. 12 months later, her savings were gone and she was in a memory care facility. She's still there. What happened to the son? He's still free. The complaint was filed, but the case was settled quietly. Briggs kept his license. I thought about sitting in that examination room in November. The way Dr. Briggs had smiled at me, warm and professional. The way he'd asked me to count backward from 100, to repeat 3 words, to tell him what season it was. The way he'd said, "You're doing wonderfully, Mrs. Whitfield. Everything looks fine." And I had felt relieved. And then we'd gone to lunch, and Curtis had paid, and he'd touched Anet's shoulder and said, "Told you she'd be okay." "Did he file anything?" I asked. "Did he produce a report that said I had declined?" Desmond met my eyes. "Not yet, but there's an appointment in his calendar for Monday morning, patient initials EW. My name is Evelyn Whitfield. Gray folder," I said. The gray folder was the rest of it. Desmond laid out 4 pages. Crestline Asset Holdings had made 3 additional transactions in the weeks following the initial transfer: 60,000 to a company called Ridgeway Consulting, 40,000 to a private lender with a Wyoming mailing address, 22,000 to what appeared to be a personal account in Curtis's name. "Curtis has a debt," Desmond said. "I'm still verifying the amount, but the private lender he's connected to has a history of short-term, high-interest lending to people in financial trouble. The repayment pressure is real." This wasn't a plan he sat on for years. Something accelerated it. "How long until the rest of the trust is gone?" "The remaining 70,000 is still in the Hargrove account, but if Curtis proceeds with the Saturday plan, gets you to sign whatever documents Anet asked you to bring, and then Briggs files his assessment Monday morning," Desmond paused, "you could lose legal control of all remaining assets within 72 hours. Vera, who had been standing quietly by the counter, said, "What do we do?" Desmond closed the gray folder. He looked at me. "The graduation is Saturday afternoon. I'm assuming there's a reception at the event hall on Brandywine. Anet booked it. About 90 guests. You're giving a toast." I hadn't been scheduled to give one, but I could. Curtis wouldn't think anything of it. He would assume it was sentiment. He would smile and let me have my moment. "I have 48 hours," I said. 48 hours, Desmond confirmed. "There's a judge I've worked with before. Emergency injunction is possible if we move tonight. I need your attorney." My attorney was a woman named Louise Fenn. I had used her for 11 years. She handled my estate, Leonard's business sale, my taxes. She was 63 and practical in the way that only certain women who have spent decades in small law firms become practical. She had no patience for drama, but absolute patience for detail. I called her at 8 that evening. She answered on the 3rd ring and said, "Talk." Talk for 14 minutes. She didn't interrupt once. "Come to my office at 7 tomorrow morning," she said. "I'll have the injunction paperwork ready. Bring everything Desmond has. And Evelyn, don't give anyone a reason to think anything has changed." I drove home and stood in my kitchen for a long time. The rehearsal for the graduation reception was the following evening. I would see Curtis. I would see Anet. I opened the drawer where I kept Leonard's old watch. I didn't take it out. I just held my hand above it. Leonard had been a quiet man. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't fight unless something mattered. When something mattered, he was immovable. I thought about that. Then I went upstairs and picked out what I was going to wear on Saturday. The rehearsal dinner was at our neighbor Jeanette's house. Casual. Backyard. Anet had strung lights along the fence and ordered food from the Italian place our grandson loved. He was there, tall and sunburned from the spring, hugging people, laughing too loud. Watching him, I felt something straighten in my spine. Curtis found me by the drink table. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You holding up okay? Big week." "I'm wonderful," I told him. "Don't forget the documents tomorrow," he said. "Anet really wants to get everything organized." "I won't forget," I said. He smiled. That smile that arrived first? Good. I watched him walk back across the yard, and I thought, you have no idea. At 11:15 that night, Louise sent a text. "Judge Harrington approved the injunction. Accounts frozen as of midnight. Officers confirmed for Saturday. You're covered." I sat in Leonard's armchair again and read the message twice. Then I got up and went to bed. I slept 4 hours. It was the most I'd slept in 2 days. Saturday came in warm and bright. My grandson graduated at 2 in the afternoon. Outdoor ceremony, folding chairs and long rows, the kind of blue sky afternoon Leonard would have loved. I sat in the family section between Vera and a cousin of Annette's, who kept crying at every name that was called. When my grandson walked across the stage, I stood up before they announced his name. I knew his walk. I had watched that walk since he was 2 years old. Afterward, photographs, the drive to Brandywine, the parking lot filling with people in good clothes. Curtis shook hands at the entrance like he was hosting. Annette floated through the room in a yellow dress. She hugged me at the door and whispered, "Did you bring the documents?" I told her I'd left them in the car. She said, "We'll get them after the toasts." She squeezed my hand. She looked happy. She looked like my daughter. I had not told her what I knew. The toasts began at 6. My grandson spoke first, thanking his mother, his coaches, his late grandfather. He said Leonard's name and his voice caught, and I pressed my lips together and breathed through it. Then the MC said, "And now, the woman who drove him to every baseball game for 6 years and never once complained, even in February, his grandmother." I stood up. I took the microphone and looked out at those 90 people, colleagues of Curtis's, friends of Annette's, 3 of my oldest clients from the billing days, 2 women from my church, my grandson and his friends at the front table looking young and terrified of adulthood. I said, when my grandson was 7, he asked me why his grandfather worked so hard. And I told him because some things are worth protecting, because the people you love deserve to have someone who will not quit. I paused. Leonard believed that. He built something solid and left it in trust for this family. For this boy, I've spent 10 years protecting that trust. The room was still listening. Curtis had a glass of wine in his hand and was smiling at me. "This week," I said, "I discovered that someone had taken $180,000 from that trust." The smile didn't move immediately. That was the thing I noticed. It took it almost 2 full seconds to disappear, like the message traveled a long distance to reach his face. I looked toward the AV booth in the back. Desmond nodded. The screen behind me lit up. A bank statement. The Leonard Whitfield Memorial Trust. March 14th, $180,000. Destination Crestline Asset Holdings, LLC. People turned. People squinted. 2 of Curtis's colleagues leaned together. My grandson looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Confusion, and then something worse, comprehension arriving slowly. Crestline Asset Holdings, I said, was registered in Wyoming 8 months ago. It has 2 members. I clicked the remote. The LLC formation document. 2 names. Curtis Aldane. Annette Aldane? Someone at the back said, "Oh, Lord." Annette stood up. Her face had gone white. "Mom." "Sit down, sweetheart." "Curtis, what is Annette?" Curtis put his hand on her arm. His voice had changed. The warmth was gone. "Don't touch her," I said. My voice did not rise. 2 men near the exit moved forward. Desmond's people dressed as guests. I turned back to the room. "The money was moved using my login credentials," I said, "from a device registered to my son-in-law's home office. My name was used to authorize a transfer I never authorized. And there was a plan for what came next." The screen changed. Dr. Briggs's name, the 2 complaint summaries, the Monday morning appointment. "There is an appointment scheduled for Monday," I said, "with a physician who has twice before produced false cognitive assessments to support guardianship transfers. The appointment was scheduled under my initials. If I had signed the documents Annette asked me to bring today, documents she told me were routine estate organization, and if Dr. Briggs had filed his assessment Monday morning, I would have lost legal control of all remaining assets by Wednesday. A woman at table 4 made a sound like she'd been struck. I looked at my daughter. Annette was standing with her hands at her sides. The yellow dress, she looked very young. She looked like she had looked at 16 when I caught her lying. That exact configuration of shame and something else. Something I recognized as the moment a person decides whether to keep lying or stop. She chose to stop. "I didn't know about the Monday appointment," she said. Her voice was unsteady. "I didn't know about Dr. Briggs. I didn't know about—" She looked at the screen. "I didn't know the number was 180. Curtis told me it was a loan. From your account to ours. Temporary, he said you'd agreed." "You're not going to say anything else," Curtis said. "I'm going to say everything," Annette said. Curtis moved toward the exit. Both of Desmond's men stepped in front of him. "Curtis Aldane," the first officer said, producing his badge. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, financial elder abuse, and identity fraud." Curtis looked at me. For the first time since I had known him, the face was entirely unguarded. No warmth, no charm, no smile. Just a man calculating odds. Finding them bad. The second officer approached the back corner of the room, where I had spotted Dr. Chartezy. Briggs 40 minutes earlier. He'd come as a guest of one of Curtis's colleagues. He looked up when he heard his name. He looked at the screen. Then he stood and walked toward the exit quickly, and the third officer stepped out of the corridor to meet him. I set down the microphone. My grandson was still at the front table. He was 22 years old, and he had just watched something at his graduation party that he would be telling people about for the rest of his life. He looked at me across the room. I gave him a small nod. He stood up. He walked to me. He put his arms around me and didn't say anything. He was 6 feet tall, and he smelled like his grandfather's aftershave. I had given it to him 2 Christmases ago, and I held on to him for a moment and let myself feel how tired I was. The guests began to leave slowly. Some came to squeeze my hand. A few couldn't look at me. An older man I recognized as Leonard's former business attorney said quietly, "You did the right thing." Louise Fenn appeared at my side. "Injunction held. Accounts remain frozen. We'll have a full recovery motion filed by Monday afternoon." She paused. "Evelyn, you should know the remaining 70,000 is intact. It's still there." I exhaled. Annette was sitting alone at a table near the window. The room was nearly empty. Rosa had left with 2 friends. The catering staff was beginning to clear. I walked over and sat down across from my daughter. She didn't look up right away. When she did, her eyes were swollen. "Tell me," I said. She told me. She had known about the LLC. Curtis had presented it as an investment vehicle. He had told her the trust funds were underperforming and that a Wyoming structure offered tax advantages. He'd told her I had been briefed on the idea and was warming to it. She had believed him because she wanted to, because he had made her feel for 6 years like she finally understood money, finally understood business, finally had a partner who treated her like she was smart. "Did you know about the loan he owed?" She shook her head. "He told me we had some debt from a bad investment. He didn't tell me how much. He didn't tell me who. Did you know about the doctor?" "No." The word came out small. "Mom, I swear I didn't know about the doctor." I looked at her. My daughter. I had held her in a hospital room in October of 1983. I had watched her become a person over 40 years, seen every version of her, the brave ones and the afraid ones. "Did you ever wonder," I said, "why he was in such a hurry?" She was quiet for a moment. Then I told myself it was because he loved us, that he wanted to protect us. Did you believe that? She looked out the window. I wanted to. I nodded. I understood wanting to. 6 months passed. Curtis entered a plea in October. He was sentenced in December, 11 years federal, charges including wire fraud, financial elder abuse, and identity fraud. The debt he owed, I learned the full number during the trial, was $312,000 to a private lender with known connections to loan sharking operations in Philadelphia. The FBI picked up the thread, and it became their case within 6 weeks of the arrest. Desmond testified. Louise handled the civil recovery. By November, $163,000 had been returned to the trust. We were still working on the rest through the civil suit. Dr. Briggs surrendered his medical license in September rather than face the board hearing. 2 additional families filed complaints after the story ran in the Delaware News Journal. He was named as a defendant in a civil case brought by one of the earlier victims' families. His attorney told the court his client had made errors in professional judgment. I was in the courtroom that day. I watched him not look at anyone. Crestline Asset Holdings was dissolved by court order in August. Anyt was not charged. The prosecutors found that her involvement had been predicated on Curtis's misrepresentations. She cooperated fully. She provided documents, emails, testimony about conversations she had not understood at the time to be significant. The prosecutor told Louise she had been forthcoming beyond what was legally required. Anyt moved out of the house she had shared with Curtis in July and into a rented townhouse in Newark, Delaware, 20 minutes from me. She took almost nothing. She started seeing a therapist 3 times a week. We talked, not every day at first. Short calls, practical things. How is my grandson doing? Whether the hydrangeas in my backyard needed cutting back, whether she needed my car on Thursday. Then longer calls. Then one Tuesday evening in September, she came over and sat at my kitchen table and we talked for 4 hours. She told me things about the 6 years of that marriage that I had not known. The small erosions, the way he had over time made her feel that her instincts were wrong, that her doubts were paranoia, that her love for her mother was something he had to manage on her behalf. I kept thinking I was being disloyal to him every time I trusted my own judgment, she said. I got up and poured more coffee. You know what I kept coming back to? She said. The November appointment? Dr. Briggs? Curtis set that up without telling me? When I found out later, reading through everything, I realized that was the moment he stopped including me. That was when I became part of the plan instead of a partner in it. I sat back down. I should have seen it, she said. You were inside it, I said. It's harder from inside. She looked at her cup. I should have called you. Yes, I said. You should have. We sat with that for a moment, not resolving it, just sitting with it. That's something you learn after a long time. Some things don't get resolved. They just get carried differently. At Thanksgiving, Anyt and my grandson came to my house. Just the 3 of us, the way it had been most years before Curtis. We made Leonard's recipe for stuffing, the one with cornbread and sage that he had inherited from his own mother and that I had never once successfully replicated to his satisfaction and had spent 30 years trying. My grandson declared it the best version yet. I was almost certain he was being kind. It didn't matter. After dinner, the 3 of us sat on the back porch. It was cold, but my grandson had brought blankets from inside. My daughter leaned against my shoulder the way she used to when she was small. We didn't talk about the trial or the trust or Curtis. We talked about Leonard, about the time he tried to build a birdhouse and made something that looked more like a small condemned building, about the way he laughed at his own jokes before he finished telling them, about the night my grandson was born and Leonard had stood in the hospital hallway and cried, not sad crying, the other kind, and I had seen it through the window because the nurse had pulled the curtain wrong. My grandson said, I think about him a lot." "So do I said. "He would have been furious," my grandson said. "About all of it." "He would have been," I agreed. "And then he would have made us laugh about something else. That was his way." The porch light caught the frost on the grass. The yard was quiet. I had spent 10 years trying to protect what Leonard built. I had succeeded, barely, and not without help, and not without cost. The trust was not fully restored. My relationship with my daughter was not what it had been. Some things had changed and would stay changed. But I was sitting on my back porch in my own house on a Thursday in November. The accounts were in my name. The documents were in my name. And my daughter was leaning on my shoulder the way she had when she was 7 years old, and the world was still something I could explain to her. That was enough. On that night, it was enough. In January, I met with Louise to update the estate documents. I added new provisions, dual authorization requirements, a third-party trustee, annual independent review. Desmond had recommended the structure. Louise improved it. I signed my name at the bottom and it felt, for the first time in years, like my own name. On the way home, I stopped at Hargrove and Associates. Penny was at the front desk. She looked up when I came in, and I could see the question on her face, whether I was there to complain, to create a problem for her, to make that moment in the copy room into something that would cost her the job. I had brought her a Christmas card the way I always did, a little late this year. She looked at it for a moment without taking it. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," I said. "That's why I did." I left her with it. I drove home. The January light was pale and cold and very clear, and when I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine, I sat there for a minute, the way I had that first afternoon when Penny had handed me her phone and the world had rearranged itself. But it felt different this time. This time I knew what I had. I still think about that parking lot, sitting in my car after Penny handed me her phone, staring at a wire transfer with my name on it for money. I had never moved. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there and let the truth do what truth does, rearrange everything quietly without asking permission. What happened to me didn't come from nowhere. Curtis didn't walk into my life and steal from me in a single bold move. It took 2 years of small things, a login he offered to manage, an appointment he suggested I keep, a word here, a concern there, each one reasonable on its own, each one building something I couldn't see until it was nearly finished. That's how this kind of harm works. It doesn't announce itself. It makes itself comfortable first. And I had let it, not because I was foolish. I want to be honest about that, because I spent a long time asking myself that question. I let it because I was tired, and because Anyt seemed happy, and because I had spent 10 years doing hard things alone, and someone offering to help felt like relief. I mistook convenience for trustworthiness. That was my part in it. But here's what I've come to understand. The thing that saved me wasn't luck. It was Penny remembering that I had always said her name. It was Vera picking up on the second ring. It was Desmond's 48 hours of work. It was Louise having a judge's number in her phone. None of those people had to show up. They showed up because, over years, I had treated people like they mattered. You don't always see the return on that kind of investment. Sometimes you see it all at once, in a copy room, on a Thursday afternoon when everything is about to go wrong. I think about what it took to stand at that podium on Saturday. Not the legal preparation. Louise and Desmond handled that, and I am grateful every day that they did. I mean the other thing, The part where you look out at 90 people and say the true thing out loud, even though it will cost you something, even though your daughter is standing 20 feet away in a yellow dress, even though part of you is still hoping you've misunderstood. Doing that required me to trust my own mind more than I trusted the story Curtis had been building about it. That was not easy. He had worked for 2 years to make me doubt myself, choosing to trust my own judgment anyway. That was the thing I am most proud of. What I want to say to anyone watching who sees themselves somewhere in this, whether you're the one being slowly cornered or the one who lets someone talk you into something you should have questioned, is this: your instincts are not the problem. When something feels wrong and you keep finding reasons to dismiss that feeling, stop. The dismissal is the warning sign, not the feeling itself. Annette and I are not where we were. I don't know if we will ever be exactly where we were, but we are somewhere real, which is more than I could have said on that Saturday night when I watched her stand in an empty reception hall in a yellow dress that had meant something beautiful 12 hours earlier. She told the truth when it mattered. That counts. I raised her. And that part of her, the part that chose to stalk, that part I recognize. Leonard used to say that the only things worth protecting are the things worth building. He spent his whole life proving that. So did I, in my way. And when the moment came to protect what we had built together, I did not quit. That is the only ending I wanted.